Okay, we're talking the Xfinity series over at Road America, and boy, oh boy, do we have a interesting, chalky slate for you guys today. Should be an interesting race. We'll just kind of jump right into it here. So, some things to keep in mind: we're at Road America. It's a road course. It's relatively a longer road course. So there's only 45 laps. So what does that mean? Well, it really means there aren't really too many dominator points up for grabs. There's basically 11 and a quarter available for laps led and 20 and a quarter available for fast laps. So really not too many points available for fast laps. I think it takes him about 2.5, 2 minutes, 15 seconds, something like that to get around this track. So it takes a while to get around the track. So dominator points aren't really too important this weekend. So what should we really be focusing on? Well, you really want to try to find the plays that either A, start deep in the field, and B, maybe they start deep in the field, but they have the ability to kind of finish inside the top 15, top 12, top 10. Ideally, you're just playing, six drivers who you feel like can either A, finish inside the top 10, completely just dominate the race, or, C, gain you positive place differential points. And I'm talking like, positive 10, positive 15, maybe even positive 20 place differential points. Dominators really aren't that big of a concern unless you assume that one driver is just going to completely walk away with this race, dominate the entire thing, start top five, lead all the laps, pick up the fast laps and finish, and you're basically playing a dominator if you think they're going to win the race. Other than that, the main focus is really just, I want to jam in as many plays who start deep in the field, who I think have the ability to finish well in this race. So because of the way that qualifying worked out, we do have a pretty chalky slate, but we'll try to kind of walk you through some drivers that we're high on and maybe some areas that you might be able to differentiate your line compared to some of the other lines that are out there. So speaking of the chalk, I guess, you can start with Larson and Allmendinger there. Both of them are going to be chalky for different reasons. Larson's coming down to the Xfinity series. Pretty cool. They were able to take a Hendrick Motors Cup car that they ran last year and convert it into a Xfinity car. So he's hopping down into the Xfinity series and he'll be running the race. No surprise, he came out and qualified first. So Larson starts on the pole. He does have the most to lose from a place differential standpoint because he can't gain you any place differential points. So immediately that avenue of potentially getting to the optimal lineup is gone for him. So how does Larson work? The only way I really see Larson working is if you think he's going to dominate this race. So you're playing Larson and expecting him to lead basically all the laps, pick up the fast laps and ultimately win this race. If that doesn't happen, there's a good chance that Larson's going to get outscored by some of the other drivers on the slate, just purely from the place differential upside that they have and the lack of dominator points available. Still high on Larson. I still think he has the best chance of winning this race. Just temper your expectations a little bit from a DFS standpoint, just because he has a good potential day in real life might not translate to a good DFS day. So still really high on Larson. I think he's going to be extremely high owned, but temper your expectations, just a little bit. AJ Allmendinger is going to be extremely chalky for a completely different reason. That team had great speed in practice, but had an issue with their brakes and weren't able to post a qualifying lap. So because of that, he is starting DFL. So he has the most place differential upside on the slate. And, he's arguably one of the favorites to win this race. So if you're playing cash games, you just automatically jam in Allmendinger. He's going to be pretty attractive for GPPs as well. So Larson and Allmendinger are both going to be extremely, high owned for different reasons. If I say you had to pick one of them, I'd probably pick AJ just because he's safer. He offers more place differential upside. I think it's easier for him to find that optimal lineup than potentially Larson. If for whatever reason Larson has an issue or, maybe finishes fifth or something like that. So just keep that in mind. But that being said, we're still high on them. So we're still going to have, if you are building multiple lines, we're going to have a lot of lines with Larson, a lot of lines with Allmendinger. Once you get to Gibbs, I think Gibbs is really interesting as a contrarian play if you're trying to get different, if you're fading Larson, or maybe you just have a lot of Larson and you just want to cover yourself a little bit. Gibbs is, no slouch. If it isn't Larson up there leading early in this race, most likely it's going to be Ty Gibbs and or maybe potentially Cole Custer. But chances are, if Larson has an issue or slips up or whatever the case might be, everyone's going to be on Larson. So what is the quick, easy pivot you can make? Instead of plugging in Larson, just plug in Gibbs and basically build the same exact line that you would have otherwise. But if you're just building one line, I think Larson's going to, between the two of them, we would go with Larson. But, Gibbs is interesting to try to maybe potentially get some leverage on the field. Gregson's going to be a little bit more of a GPP option. Starts 7th, offers you a little bit of place differential upside if he can get inside like the top 3, potentially win this race. It's just not as likely for him. And he's kind of in that weird, like dead man's, no man's land starting 7th. So I'm not going to rule him out, but I don't really think I'm going to have too much Gregson today. However, I do like Justin Allgaier quite a bit. He gives you a decent amount of place differential upside. We know he's in a JRM car. They've been running well. He runs pretty well on the road courses. He isn't a road course ringer, by any means, but has the skill, the ability, and the equipment to get inside the top 5. And those are the type of plays that we really want to target. So I like, maybe pairing him with AJ Allmendinger, or maybe, pivoting off of AJ, which I don't necessarily think you should do. And maybe, going to Allgaier. There's different ways you can construct your line. There's a lot of chalk plays. It might only take one pivot. It might potentially take 2. But just know a lot of these DFS players are going to be jamming in these guys. And there's a lot of plays on the slate that aren't going to carry as much ownership. Cole Custer is another GPP interesting option. I like him a little bit more than Gregson, just because, Custer had some solid speed in practice. He backed it up in qualifying as well. Probably isn't as likely to lead as Gibson Larson, but there's still a chance. And I don't really think that many people are going to be playing Cole Custer. So if you're building multiple lines, you just want to try to get yourself some coverage, I think you should sprinkle in some Custer ownership. Once you get down to the 9K range, I think all these drivers are decent. I don't think any of them are must-haves. Reddick and Hill are very similar plays. Reddick is a Cup Series driver. He's extremely talented. He starts 9th, so it gives you a little bit of place differential upside, but not a ton. Same with Austin Hill. Austin Hill's been running pretty well on the road courses. You're playing Reddick and Hill because you assume that they're most likely going to finish, top 5 if you're playing them in your line. They're both going to be a little bit more GPP options just because of their starting position, but they're fine plays. Barry's going to be a little bit safer, starting 16th. It gives you a little bit more place differential upside. Maybe not as the skill wise as maybe Reddick, and maybe hasn't had the same type of performances on the road courses as Austin Hill, but Barry's still a good, talented driver. So I like Reddick, Hill, and Barry, quite a bit. Mayer is interesting. I'm going to mark him as low just because I have a hard time believing that Mayer is going to get up in front and pass some of the drivers who start in front of him. My fear is he just gets stuck riding around 5th all day. And if he finishes 5th, like, hey, it's going to be a good day for him. But I don't really see too much upside besides that. I doubt he's going to have the ability and or the car to pass Larson, to pass Gibbs, pass Custer. Maybe he gets around Herbst, but I just think he kind of reached his ceiling, starting 5th there. Driver I am really high on in the 8K range. There's a couple of them for different reasons, but Daniel Hemrick. If you didn't watch qualifying, you might not have realized, but Hemrick didn't get out on his session until very late. So he was really only able to run one lap In that lap that he had, he got loose, went off the track, was able to save the car, but it scrubbed a ton of speed. It was looking like he would have most likely contended at least for making a second round of qualifying. So because of that, we know he has a fast car. We know he's a talented driver. He starts 22nd, and he might potentially get overlooked for a lot of guys just slamming in, John Hunter Nemechek in this range, and some of the drivers who potentially start deeper in the field. So I like Hemrick a lot for that reason. I think he has a ton of upside. Brandon Jones, unless Brandon Jones starts really deep in the field, I don't really like playing him on road courses. Aren't really necessarily his strong suit. I don't really feel like you have to go there, or I think there's other ways to get different. John Hunter Nemechek's going to be extremely chalky. He did have a poor qualifying time, but he's super easy to fit in lines at his price. He offers you a ton of place differential upside. He can't really hurt your line. Miguel Paludo, I think, is an interesting pivot off the John Hunter Nemechek chalk. Paludo's in a JRM car. He mostly only runs these handful of road courses throughout the year. My only fear with him is he's not a regular, right? And I could see him potentially, having an issue. But he's still medium interest. So anyone who's medium or high on, we want to be kind of either at the field or maybe slightly over the field or maybe even slightly under the field, depending on who that driver is. And anyone who's low, we most likely aren't going to be getting too much, maybe just a lineup or two. Sheldon Creed and Sammy Smith are both kind of the same place. They start a little bit too high for us. But Sheldon Creed looks pretty fast. I think his ability to get out front and lead laps is minimal, but it's there. I'm not saying it's impossible, but between the two of them, I could see Creed doing it. I can't see Sammy Smith getting out there to the lead. And like I said, even if you do get the lead, if you lead 3 laps, like it doesn't really matter. You just want to try to get drivers in your lineup who can finish well. So we're not really focusing on the lap leader unless you expect them to completely dominate this race. So it's just, can I see this driver finishing inside the top 10, top 12, top 15 at the end of the race? And can they gain me double-digit place differential points? If the answer isn't yes to either of those questions, most likely I'm not playing them. Landon Castle is going to be a guy who I think can fit those questions that I asked. I think his ceiling is probably around 8th, 12th, somewhere in that range, but I like the upside that he offers. Mike Snyder is interesting. He's run really well on the road courses so far this year. He just didn't have the pace in practice and qualifying, which is a concern. And I know he's going to carry a lot of ownership. Still going to be high on him. I still think that car is good enough. I still think Snyder is a good enough driver on the road courses to turn it around. I just probably going to come in under the field on Snyder just because of the times that I did see in practice and qualifying. So just keep that in mind. Not that I'm not interested in him. He's still high. I just probably want to come in under the field versus over the field. Andy Lally's interesting. I think he qualified right around where his practice times were. We know he's a great road course racer. Just wish his equipment was a little bit better. The question then becomes how far do you think Lally can finish? I really struggle to see him finishing any higher than about 15th in this equipment. But you never know. So he's still going to be in our player pool. Ty Dillon's going to be a guy I do like. Don't necessarily love the equipment that he's in, but I do like that it's Ty Dillon. It's an experienced, Cup Series driver who's going to take care of the equipment and should get a better finish than what that car is really capable of. So I can see him just kind of basically staying clean throughout the race, just kind of running his own race and, maybe finishing, in the top 15 or contending for a top 15 at the end of the day. I feel more confident in Ty Dillon getting up there than I do Andy Lally, but both of them are fine plays. Sieg's another fine play. I'm just not as high on Sieg as I am with Dillon and Lally, just because Sieg, he qualified right where his practice times were at. So I think if you can get to, Lally, Dillon, or even Schneider, I would go there before going to Sieg, but I don't mind Sieg. It's not like I'm, going against him by any means. Herbst is going to be a guy I just probably don't get to. He just starts too high. LeBay, Moffitt, and Partis are all interesting. I like all of them a lot. I don't necessarily love if I like all of them together. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, just depending on the way that your lineup is being constructed and what plays you want to go. But LeBay posted basically top 10 practice times, right outside the top 10 in practice. Really good road course racer. We know this is kind of his specialty. Moffitt is probably my least favorite interest of these drivers. He always has amazing speed throughout the race. He just never gets the finishes. So if he's able to actually hold, the car together and not have an issue, I think Moffitt could have a wonderful day. Same with Partis. Partis steps in and runs these road courses and usually does a pretty good job and posted great practice times as well. So I really like LeBay, Moffitt, and Partis. If you're able to fit one of those plays in your line, especially for tournaments, I like going that route. Or potentially just stacking some of the chalk plays. Clements, Alfredo, Karam, Dyson. When you start looking at the field, it's you really got to start making arguments of why you should play some of these drivers. And I have a hard time coming up with reasons why you should plug Clements in, why you should plug Alfredo in, why you should plug Karam in. It's just, I'm not completely ruling him out. Clements starts too high. Alfredo starts mid-pack. I think he finishes mid-pack. Sage, I think, has probably be my favorite interest of the four of them right here. I just wish he started a little bit further back. We do know those Alpha Prime cars are quick. I think he can easily finish, inside the top 15. So, maybe I'll bump him up to medium. If you need another driver in that range, he's going to be a GPP only, type of play. Dyson just doesn't have the equipment. Brown's going to be a driver I'm going to try to come in under the field on. I know he's going to be extremely chalky, but look at how this team's been running recently. They haven't had this pace. They haven't had the speed. They don't have the finishes. And if you look at the practice and qualifying times for this weekend, he's qualifying, in the rear of the field because that's where his times were at in practice. It's not like this was a fluke run. The car doesn't have pace. This team's been off. I know he's going to be extremely high owned. So he's probably the first driver who's a chalky play that I want to, get off of or come under the field on. Jeb Burton's going to be a little bit of the opposite. I don't mind going to Jeb. I think he's extremely mispriced. He posted the 13th fastest time in practice, starts in the rear. He's going to be a chalky play as well, but I'd much rather plug Burton in than Brown. I'm still going to have a decent amount of both of them. And then once you get to, maybe I'll bump Blicky up to medium as well for the same arguments that we talked about. Karam, Blicky's just a little bit cheaper and the exact same equipment. They start right next to each other. So we know these cars have good pace. Rogers is in the MBM car, probably just equipment-wise, is going to hold him back. And then Curry, Weatherman, Graff, Gallagher, and Williams, they all start deep. I think they're all going to finish deep. I don't really necessarily see them getting inside the top 15, really. And like I said, that's really what I want to focus on. Drivers who can finish inside the top 15 or gain, positive, plus 10, plus 15, plus 20 place differential points. And it just most likely isn't going to happen. So pretty chalky slate. Really comes down to if you just want to focus on all place differential plays, maybe a driver who thinks could completely dominate the race, like a single dominator, and then stacking them with place differential plays, maybe trying to get a little bit different with your line and focus on some of these drivers who kind of start in the middle of the pack, some of the medium, interest drivers. So should be interesting to see how it plays out. But that's going to do it for the Xfinity Series Road America picks video. Hopefully this has been helpful. If it has, all we really like is really dropping a like on the video. And if you aren't subscribed, it just takes a second to hit that subscribe button. The goal is hopefully to get up to 1,000 subscribers at the end of the day. I think we're at 513 at the moment. So the next milestone is 600. So we're crawling and scratching our way, getting there. Any final thoughts, we'll post them on Twitter. It's at FastCarsFM. If you guys want access to the spreadsheet, have it up while you're making your lines, just hop over on Twitter, and you can also interact with us over there as well. But that'll do it. So best of luck, everybody, and we'll catch you on the Cup video later.